What's up, Daniel? So we were talking off camera for a little bit.
Yeah.
We're getting into some pretty fun stuff. I Can you give someone or all of the audience, can you give them like a 30 to 2 minute, like 30-second to 2 minute, like who you are, like what you're all about?
Oh man. Well, my name's Daniel. Grew up in Magnolia. Since I was a little kid, literally probably 5 years old. I remember seeing like the world's strongest men on TV and just being obsessed. I would see older guys who were like really jacked, and I couldn't understand, like, all I ever wanted was to be big and strong, And so I've spent most of my life pursuing uh, the strength world, but early in. And I think this is where a lot of my research came in, not to like educational, but just wanting to dive in and learn. When I was early 20s, trained stupid, got a lot of injuries, got beat up quite a bit, tried a billion different fad diets and everything else. And really, I've always kind of been the guy that I will look into something and I'll try it and see what happens. Like I'm kind of the guinea pig. And so I guess what you could say, if I could sum it up, what I'm about, man, I want to learn my body, and I want to push my body uh, to the best limits I can under wisdom.
Yeah,
So yeah, a lot of trial and error, but
that's awesome.
yeah.
So strongman stuff, you've been doing that for, like,
Oh
were you doing that in
gosh,
high
man.
school or just?
Yeah. So high school, it was a little bit more like just bro stuff, like big bench press.
Yeah.
Legs for me was just like some leg press and leg extensions, and that was it. It was my senior year when Coach Romanelli taught me how to squat, like a real squat. And what's funny is I never really cared to learn it. When he taught me, man, it was like 6 months, and I blew up to 500 pounds on squat like it was nothing. And so I was just always really good at like squatting and pressing. But the one thing that held me back from like a real strongman stage was deadlift.
Yeah,
I'm just
that's
trash
pretty
at it, man.
common.
Huh?
Some people, like people that can squat really well, can't deadlift. People that
Yeah.
can deadlift really well can't squat.
Yeah. Yeah. It's my curse. But so, and now, I don't know if you remember when I was 19 out of high school, I got in a motorcycle accident,
Yeah.
really mangled my right leg, had to have full reconstruction. So my flexion on my right knee is like on a good day, maximum 90%.
Okay.
And it's not a pain issue. It's just stops, scar tissue built up in the joint. And, cause my femur, like the bottom portion of my femur, like when it broke, this part like split off completely. And so they screwed it
Okay.
back, but all that scar tissue built inside the joint. Um, so that took me out. Like with powerlifting, I can only do like push pull. I can't make depth on a squat, but I still
Yeah.
train them because I love, dude, squatting's my favorite lift of all times, man. Yeah.
That's awesome.
Yeah. Yeah. So I,
Yeah. I mean, a little of our background, we grew up, you knew my brother,
oh
we'd
yeah.
have parties, do all the things
Yeah.
back in the day.
Yeah.
And I wanted to reach back out to you because I'm like, there, I would go to the gym that you worked at
Hmm.
and you were always strong. Like you're always doing like heavy stuff. And I'm just like, oh, I'm going to get on the treadmill. And,
Yeah.
like we talked about earlier, get on the treadmill, do some machine stuff, not know what's going on.
Yeah.
I'm seeing you over here like lifting crazy stuff. I'm like, this is amazing. And
Yeah.
drinking, you told me, and I tried it a couple times. I still can't do it. The
The ground chicken
blended,
or the blended chicken.
yeah,
Yep. Oh
blended
yeah.
chicken. And just, I was like, I tried it. I was like, yeah, Daniel told me about this. Let me try it. I'm like, I can't do it.
Yeah. Man,
I
those
can't.
days I was, gosh, I was early 20s. I was really wanting to get into like, I wanted to go real far with strongman. And the thing is, I was at the very top of like the lightweight division or the very bottom of the heavyweight division. And there was no middle ground back then. And so this
What
guy
weight
that
is that?
at the time, I think I was 240. I was about 240 on the dot. And I think, if I remember correctly, the cutoff was somewhere around, it may have been in the 240s or 250. They've changed weight classes now. They've changed like the bracketing for it.
Yeah.
Um, but this guy that had been in it for a long time, he trained with Marshall White and Travis Ortmeyer, some of those like old school guys. He said, "Man, you need to get up to like 300 pounds." And I'm like, well, I don't. Obviously, pharmaceuticals were offered, and I'm like, I don't want to get into that world, man. Like, when I was in high school, because I had a lot of drug issues when I was in high school. I also played with a lot of pro hormones and stuff like that, and it had done its damage just messing with the pro hormones alone. And so I really didn't want to get into a lot of like anabolic steroids, and so that's what got me. I mean, 3 times a day, not counting other meals, I'm drinking blended chicken breasts and eating like 4 peanut butter jelly sandwiches, man, just trying to get calories. But heaviest I think I got back then was 255 or 256. But also, like, I was at that age, I was young enough to where I could train kind of dumb without getting too hurt. I could just, it was like progressive overload, 5 pounds a week is just what I'm going to do with everything. No big strategy to it. It wasn't until my later 20s that I started learning how to really effectively program, like I guess what you would call like an optimal strength program. So
Yeah.
yeah, but yeah, man.
Where are you sitting now as far as weight?
I'm about 270,
270.
275. Yeah, and I'm
How tall
trying
are you?
to. What's that?
How tall are you?
About 6'1" ish.
6'1".
Yeah,
Yeah. You're
yeah. So
meaty.
yeah, yeah. I'm a refrigerator. I would like to drop a little bit of it probably, because the arthritis in my right knee is getting pretty bad, and I know that walking around at 275 definitely is not helping that. So, but yeah. So now it's like I want to compete in some stuff. I don't know if you saw the other day. I posted a video of me doing a behind the neck push press, and
Yeah.
like honestly, man, the most I'd ever done on a behind the neck push jerk was I think 300 on the dot. So to hit 315 on a push press, I was like, it surprised me. So now I'm like, man, I kind of want to go back into strongman, but I don't know. So I've been doing
It
some
looked easy
powerlifting.
too.
Oh
I was
yeah,
like those plates look fake the way you're moving it.
yeah,
Like I was
yeah,
like, that's amazing.
yeah. I don't know like, so we kind of set up a home gym. Like I said, we're renovating a lot here. We set up a home gym. We basically just have like a squat cage, barbell, and a bunch of bumper plates. Um, we're working on getting like a glute ham raise and some stuff like that. But the gym I've been working out at is called Texas Iron Republic, and it is a big time powerlifting gym. In fact, the guy that owns it has the all time world record squat for the 220 weight class. Squatted like 850 something.
That's
So
awesome.
yeah. Um, but he's got, I mean, dude, like, are you familiar with like West Side Barbell?
Oh yeah.
Yeah. So I'm not, they don't necessarily train like that, but they're very much set up as like a West Side Barbell style gym. They have the board where you want to get your name up,
Yeah.
very rich in accessory machines, like, so it's been good. Learned a lot. The downside is we live, which you're familiar with Magnolia, we live in the woods, man.
Yeah.
And that gym is like the woodland side of Magnolia. So it's like a 45-minute
Okay.
drive for us now. But
Jeez.
yeah. So I don't know, hoping to stay there, but we'll see what happens. So
Yeah. Are you
yeah.
planning on staying in Magnolia for the foreseeable future?
Um, we, so when Chelsea and I first met, my wife now, when we first met like 3-ish years ago, um, my parents were getting older, and I was kind of at that space where I'm like, I feel like it would be disrespectful to leave them as they're getting to a space in life where they need more help. And so we kind of agreed that we'd stay around in Magnolia until at least my parents had passed. But then, literally 4 weeks to the day before our wedding, her dad unexpectedly passed.
Oh
And
wow.
so, yeah, it was wild, man. So now her mom is widowed. Um, so we just thought, she's younger than my parents, but we just thought, man, we want to stay around to make sure, we can help her as well. And so um, now once everyone's gone, man, who knows? We got a lot of assets here that we could get rid of and basically probably move wherever.
Yeah.
So yeah.
Yeah. After my move from Magnolia area coming out to the hill country, it's so hard to go back to the Houston, greater
Oh
Houston area. It's just
yeah.
we go to the river every weekend to do
Man,
walks.
yeah,
It's just so hard, but I definitely get it.
yeah, yeah. We actually honeymooned at Canyon Lake,
Oh,
and
nice.
so yeah, we drove down to New Braunfels every day because there's a Gold's Gym over there, and that's where we every day of our honeymoon, man, we cruised into town, got a workout in. Oh yeah,
Is she into working out as well?
oh yeah. So when we met, so she was homeschooled. When she was younger, she did Highland dance. I don't know if you're familiar with Highland dance. She
No.
did that and softball. So she went to
Okay.
Mary Hardin Baylor. She played softball for Mary Hardin Baylor. Um, when her and I met, the reason we actually met is I was at a coffee shop that she worked at, and I was wearing a shirt that said Barbells and Bibles. And so she had come up to me and she said, "Hey, where'd you get that shirt? What's that about?" So I told her because back then I was really big into CrossFit too, and so I was like, "Well, it's a little CrossFit group that on Wednesdays hold a Bible study afterwards." And she said, "Well, fitness and my faith are the two biggest things in my life." And I said, "Oh shoot," you know. So we start talking, and so we really kind of those are the two things we kind of I guess you could say like gravitated around when we first met. But there were some things, and she'd be fine with me saying it because she's very passionate about this stuff as well. You know, while we were dating and even engaged, man, she would tell me the horror stories of her menstrual cycle. I mean, like first two nights up crying and vomiting pretty much all night. You know, I'm like,
Jeez.
that's not okay. You know, and she's real thin. She's probably 5'6". At that time, probably about 120 pounds. Where now she's about 135. Um, but you know, her mom has Hashimoto's, and so she eats a very particular like anti-inflammatory diet. And so
Yeah.
Chelsea's like she's doing CrossFit one or two times a day, basically living on like an egg for breakfast, a piece of chicken, you know, like no calorie intake. So we got married. We moved out of CrossFit and started doing just some bare bones basic strength training. And I started feeding her beef. And man, first, you know, when her first menstrual cycle was rolling around, I'm thinking like, oh gosh, here we go. And she was like, dude, I feel great. And ever since, man, so you know, feed her. I do all the cooking pretty much. She's a sourdough fanatic. Yeah, but I do most of the cooking, and so I started feeding her a lot of beef. We moved her training more geared towards strength training, um, and you know, really not like lowering because you know with CrossFit, it's like if you go there, you're laying on the floor by the time you're done.
Yeah.
So now it's like I might give her like 1 day a week that's some pretty high intensity in her training, and everything else is either volume or speed. Um, and like hormonally, you know, everything has just like leveled out. She feels a million times better. Um,
That's like true hormonal dysregulation. Like so many people are like, "Oh, I can't lose weight because of X, Y, and Z."
mhm,
Whenever clients come to me and they're like, "I can't lose weight," I'm like, well, "What are you eating?" Well, I don't know. I
mhm,
eat pretty good. Let's track your food. And
yeah,
they're like, "Oh, I think it's my cortisol. I think it's my thyroid. I think it's X, Y, and Z." And it's like, let's look at your diet.
yeah,
On average, say this person should be eating 2,400 calories. Like you're eating 3,600 calories. That's why you're not losing weight.
mm,
And then on the weekends, you eat more. And then on the weekdays, you're starving yourself with 1,000 calories. Like you're not consistent. Like that's
yep,
not a hormonal fluctuation. So I
yeah,
love that you gave her story because that's true hormonal fluctuations of
yeah,
like,
yeah,
yeah, that's
yeah. It
real.
was
That's not the other way around. So thanks for
no,
sharing that.
yeah, man, yeah. It's and that is, you know, I work full time in ministry, but one of the things, so and just a little bit of backstory, you know, I was in high school, like I said, you know, I had did a lot of drugs and stuff like that, and um, really didn't have any direction in life in general. I just, you know, I just partied. You know, I'm like, I don't know. And uh, my senior year, Coach Romanelli, yeah, I had taken his weight training course, which I don't know if did you know Romanelli well?
I saw him one time, and
Oh,
he is a
okay.
massive human being.
Yeah, he
That's all I
was, dude.
remember. It was
Giant. Yeah. So he was really well educated. And at the time, he was one of the few people in Texas, one of the few coaches in Texas that was a CSCS certified. And
oh, that's cool.
yeah,
There's
so
not many high schools have those.
no, no, not at all. And so he did a weight training class, which you know back then, you know, we had the A day and B day block
Yep.
schedule. So every day we had weight training, we sat through 45 minutes of lecture and then 45 minutes of workout. And so like we learned a ton, man. Like, but I remember my senior year, I always had a really good bench press, but he had come up to me, he said, "Hey, if I train you how to squat, would you power lift for me this year?" I was like, "I'll give it a shot, you know?" And so I did and hit some pretty good numbers. But that was like one of the first things for me. It's probably the first time I'd say that because I got in a lot of trouble in school, and he that was probably the first time that someone grabbed hold of something positive in my life, pointed it out, and was like, "Man, you can do something with this," you know. Um, and so I've always thought, and I have a lot of young guys that want to learn how to get strong, and they always ask me, "What do you charge?" I'm like, I get a full time paycheck, you know, so I'm not going to like freely I've received, so freely I'm going to give.
Yeah.
Um, but it is, you know, it's the same thing as like trying to help people understand overtraining is not the answer, right? When you want to lose weight and you say things like, "Well, no, I don't, you know, I don't really eat that bad." I'm like, "Well, let's get detailed on that. What does that mean?" And you start to realize it's one of two things. They're trying to gain weight and they're eating 1,000 calories a day, or they're trying to lose weight. They don't realize that if you lay out the weekly schedule, you might be eating light on 3 or 4 days a week, but when you're splurging 3 out of 4 days, you can make up
Yeah.
those calories pretty quickly, you know?
Oh yeah.
Um, so
That's
yeah,
huge with
it's a
like
wild
just
thing.
the Friday night, Saturday, Sunday. That's people like they don't think about it.
Yeah. Yeah,
Friday night, they're
exactly.
done with the work week. They're stressed out from the work week, and yeah, let's go to Chili's and get this margarita, this burger, this
Yeah.
dessert. That's
Yeah.
3,000 calories right there
Exactly.
in one meal.
Exactly. Yeah. And that's, you know, especially when you start talking like margaritas, because that's another thing. Like people just don't consider liquid calories, man. Like especially with the sugar in a margarita, you know, there's a lot in
Yeah.
there. Um,
Or snacks. There's so many
oh
times I'm like,
yeah.
is that all you've had today?
Hmm.
Yeah, that's all I've had today. Like you didn't have nuts or yeah, I had some nuts. You didn't
Yep.
have any like snacks like chocolates that someone brought to work. Oh yeah, I also had a donut this morning. Like,
Yeah.
yeah, these are all the little things that are
Yeah.
adding up.
Yeah. Well, and that's what, you know, with my dad, my dad is like, I think he's about 70 years old, but, he discovered YouTube a few years ago. And, I mean, anything that comes across, man, he's like, and so he discovered something about pine nuts, you know, and he's at home eating like tons of pine nuts and he's like gaining weight. He's like, "But they're healthy." I'm like, "But dad, it's a fatty nut, which means it has 9 calories per gram of fat. Like you can't eat that many and go, well, it's a healthy food, so I'll lose weight, you know, like, but
Yeah.
people don't, it's true, man. They just don't consider the small stuff like that when it comes to either weight loss or weight gain, you know, whichever direction you're trying to go. Um, and I know I'd reached out to you a while back, actually, I think on Facebook Messenger,
Yeah.
because I'd asked your thoughts, I think, on like carnivore diet. Um,
Yeah.
because you know, like I said, I've done a lot of the fad diets, a lot of the trendy ones, and um, you mentioned earlier like Atkins and even like keto. And honestly, of all the things I tried vegetarian diets. It was actually it would probably been a year after you were working out at the same gym where I was at. Um, I tried to go vegetarian. I was doing pea protein and I was eating. I mean, bro, I'm eating bowls of lentils, you know, because I'm trying to get my protein in. But
Yeah.
it is like shredding my intestines, man. I was in like legitimate pain for like hours a day because of it. But I also noticed like at the time, this is a weird tangent side note. I converted to Christianity in 2009. Probably a year in, I'd gone into a cult unknowingly. I was ignorant, and in the cult they were adamant about fasting, and so um, I was fasting like, and not like a health or fitness regimen. I was fasting like 2 or 3 days a week. Um, I'd lost like 50 something pounds in just a couple of months. Like it was crazy.
Jeez.
Came out of that and I basically am restarting, you know, because I think I was like 200 pounds on the dot. And so I'm like restarting because I'm realizing like they had kind of brainwashed me. I lost all the fitness I'd worked for, all the strength. So
Now I'm curious.
then,
How'd
go ahead.
you how'd you get into it briefly, I guess, or go as
Yeah.
in much depth as you want? And then the thing that I'm most curious about is how'd you get out of it? Like what?
Yeah.
Because like
Okay.
if like you said you were brainwashed, so like for me it's like how do people get the brainwashed and then leave? Like that's
Mhm.
the mind-boggling thing for me.
Yeah. So I don't know. I don't know like where you are like in a spiritual or faith context. So I don't know like
I'll give you a little kind of where I am now.
sure.
For the longest time, you hung out with my brother. He's a
Yeah.
psychologist, very deep into philosophy. I've
Hmm.
always loved philosophy because of that. Every time we had parties, my favorite time at parties were hanging out with people talking about philosophy.
Yeah.
I, for the longest time, would never discuss religion because I
Hmm.
didn't want to give someone false pretenses on what I may or may not mean
Hmm.
because we'd have to go into a conversation too deeply. Like I felt like I needed to talk to someone for 30 days for them to understand my vocabulary, my understanding, this whole concept and crazy complexities of what I thought before I could explain what I believed
Hmm.
or didn't believe. And so for the longest time, I think I led down the line of there has to be a beginning.
Hmm.
The Big Bang, there still has to be a miracle for that to happen.
Sure.
The Big Bang could be probable. I had no problem with that. I'm fine with evolution. I was fine with everything. But I was like, there has to be an end to the beginning. Like there has to be a starting point.
Hmm.
And so that's I would for the longest time I would never say that I believed God existed, but in the back of my like deep subconscious, that's what God was, the beginning.
Okay.
I would say in the past, and so it's crazy. I come, very science heavy, very data has to be proven to me. It
Hmm.
has to make sense. My wife's childlike, Christian faith, like,
Yeah.
yeah, God, like God's real. God, like, and to me, it's like, but what about this and that? Like
Yeah.
playing devil's advocate with almost everything, not because I
Hmm.
didn't believe her and I can't question her belief set, but because I'm curious.
Yeah.
And it's crazy how I meet her I start diving more into religious ideology ideas because I've always been curious about Taoism, Buddhism,
Sure.
uh, Christianity, etc. Like everything. It's always been fascinating to me. So meet her, start going a little bit more into the rabbit hole of Christianity,
Hmm.
and then I started working at a forensic engineering firm, and I met this one of my good friends now, who same thing like Christian anytime I have issues or ideas, I talk to him about it. So then that leads me to like, this doesn't make sense. Explain it to me. And then he's really good at arguing with me. Like we'll have
Hmm.
a 45-minute to 3 hour long conversation about one line in the Bible. I'm like, that doesn't make
Yeah.
any sense. And he's like, well, this is why. Then I'm like, oh, now I have more context. So now I can go figure that out.
Yeah.
So it's crazy. I would say in the past, probably 2 years, which is crazy, having my son has probably led me to feel more comfortable saying I believe in God.
Interesting. Okay. Because of
Yeah.
like that paternal connection you've had.
Probably.
Yeah.
Um, that, and then I always had these weird, like whenever my dad passed away,
Hmm.
he was in the hospital, he was hooked up to machines, had a massive heart attack. As he was up there, I came downstairs and I was hanging out with my family. Don't know what this is, but when he passed away, I knew it.
Oh wow.
M-
Okay.
My brother came down. He's like, sorry. I was like, yeah, like I know.
Hmm.
Like I could, almost like I could feel it.
Yeah.
And the same thing happened with my grandma whenever she passed away later on. Uh, we were at a concert, we had a Chris Stapleton concert, and I just like looked up at the stars and I was like, something feels missing.
Yeah.
So I told Lindsay, and then 10 minutes later, my mom called and she said, your grandma just passed away. It's like
Yeah.
weird.
Yeah.
And then I didn't feel that feeling again I didn't know my grandma was doing, like, she was, from what I knew, she was in better, like, she was in the hospital, but she was doing better from what I last heard from, like, a
Hmm.
few hours prior. They weren't pulling plugs, like, it was just, she just passed away. The next time I felt that, like, overwhelming sensation of, because I didn't feel bad. Like, I didn't feel like, I almost felt this weird energy of, I don't know how to describe it, like an overwhelming energy of like everything's perfect, everything's fine, like
Oh,
everything's,
nice. Yeah.
it's like okay,
Yeah.
like okay, like perfect, like everything's like, I don't know, it's not like a good or a bad, it's just like a,
Something
I don't know,
transcendent though. Yeah.
something crazy. And then whenever my son got baptized, same thing. I was like,
Yeah.
whoa.
Yeah. Yeah. Oh, it's
Sorry, getting
crazy. Yeah.
emotional talking about all that.
No, yeah, that's
It's
good,
crazy.
man. Yeah. Yeah. I liked it. So that's encouraging for me to hear though, just that you're able to have those conversations. Cause as a person who works in ministry, one of the things that's becoming, um, progressively more frustrating for me is oftentimes the lack of intelligence inside of Christianity, that people, I can't land on, and I don't think the Bible would argue for this concept of ignorant faith, like, uh, there's, especially in the Gospels, Luke and John both, or even in Acts, they're wanting to give us something objective to stand on so that we can have evidence to believe, And so when people are just like, well, I just believe and I don't know. And that was a lot of my problem when I was younger regarding the Christian faith was really two things is one, how people just didn't have answers for things, like I'd ask basic questions that they didn't have an answer for. And so that I struggled with that one, even though I really wasn't much of an intellect when I was in high school, really at all. But I like kind of what you said. One of the things that I love the most about your brother and Jason Ogles and all those guys was they were so intellectual and they loved to talk about deep things. And I was very drawn to that, but it just wasn't my atmosphere until I met them.
Yeah.
And even Colin, Colin Grigson, him and I, even once I came to the faith, he had asked me, what happened, man? And so we talked about a lot of stuff and I was still very young in my faith. So I didn't really have a lot of, uh, answers, but I did have some. And in the end, he told me, he's like, I think you give respectable answers. He said, it's just not for me, man.
Yeah.
Yeah, I don't know what to do with that, but um, yeah.
Colin
So
was definitely interesting because he always, him and I ended up hanging out whenever he moved to Austin. I ended up hanging out with him for like 6 months, like straight. Like I was
yeah,
going through a breakup and ended up hanging out with him like all the time because he was living in Austin.
yeah,
And it was interesting hanging out with him and like listening to his perspective because I'm like, I respect him. Like he thinks
hmm,
deeply, and but he's also very passionate for other people. Like, yeah, if you want to believe that, like it doesn't make sense to me, but
yeah, yeah,
so that's cool to have someone like
yeah,
that.
absolutely, yeah. And so um, well, the lack of intellect in Christianity, but then also one thing I struggled with really bad was I would be around groups of people in high school that were affiliated with churches in Magnolia, student ministries in Magnolia, who would tell me that I was going to go to hell because I wasn't a Christian while they're literally sniffing lines of cocaine next to me, and I'm
Yeah,
like, if this is what Christianity is for you, I want no part in it, like, because what you're saying is I just need to add the element of church to my life, but I'm going to live the same way. Like consistency and integrity have been a big thing in my life. And I don't even want to throw out hypocrisy because, like, I know there's areas I'm hypocritical still, um, but I can at least be consistent and transparent and vulnerable where I fall miserably short. Um, but yeah, so to the cult question, when I came to faith, it was a pretty odd thing, honestly. When I was probably about 21, I got my first job, personal training, first job ever. And my first day on the job, I'd gone into the bathroom and it was like a combo bathroom locker room and it was all like one area, very small. And this guy's in there. He had cut off sleeves, pretty jacked dude, covered in tattoos. And we just start kind of small talking and walk out, don't think anything of it. Second day, I'm in my office and I'm kind of filling out some stuff on my calendar. And he comes in and he's like, "Hey man, I wanted to share something with you." I said, "What's that?" I'd never really heard anything that I would say is like truly Christian aside from, "Do you believe in Jesus?" To which I'm like, "Not really." But he basically, and I'm just nutshelling, but he told me that he was a former meth addict that made his living robbing houses. He got pulled over. He was like in a stolen truck with a bunch of drug money and a stolen pistol. He got locked up with like 7 felony convictions, had a few of them dropped, spent 5 years in prison, but he came to faith in prison. And he's telling me this, and I'm like, oh my, because I was never robbing houses or anything like that, but I was mixed up in all kinds of drugs and violence, and I just never heard of someone from my background coming to know the Lord. And so that really bothered me, not necessarily in the sense of like again, it wasn't a fear thing. It was more almost kind of like what you had mentioned with your grandma's passing. It was like I felt like for the first time in my life I was connected to something much bigger than myself and outside of myself.
Yeah.
And I wanted to pursue it, but the problem is, and not that my friends were a problem by any means. Some of those are still some I would still consider some of my best friends. Um, but we all lived a certain lifestyle, and for me, it was like I don't want to abandon this lifestyle by myself. I wanted somebody to go with me, and nobody wanted to. And my girlfriend at the time, I tried to get her to kind of pursue this with me, and she didn't want to. And so after about 4 or 6 weeks of really been bothered by this, I just kind of shut it down. Um, and what's weird about that is shortly after that, I'd kind of gotten into boxing. It's really weird sidestep. I got into a backyard boxing match and I KO'd this dude pretty hard. And then I was just like, I wonder what I could do in boxing. So I got in for a couple of years. Um, During that time, man, I think as far as discipline goes, I was probably the best I'd ever been. I wasn't drinking nearly as much. I'd quit all drugs. I was training 2 times a day and I was in really good shape. But man, I was just angry, dude. Like just angry at the world, at everybody. And I couldn't understand. Like I felt so miserable and no one else around me did, and I didn't understand that. And it got to where with my girlfriend, with my parents, like I couldn't tell them I loved them anymore. I just didn't believe that love was a thing. Um,
Yeah.
and my girlfriend had an older brother who's an atheist. And he started to tell me some things that, when I look back now, I'm like, I could never even get on board with that because it doesn't make enough sense. But he was just like, oh, they found this thing in the ocean and you combine this and this and you got to, that's human life. We don't need a God. And I'm like, oh, again, I wasn't a very intellectual person. So I'm like, maybe there's not a God. I don't have to worry about any of this. But to be honest, at that time, I also just didn't really care that much. But one day, I don't remember the exact date, but it was June of 2009. Man, I am a die. Like I will either until I'm a paralytic or dead, I will always ride motorcycles. I love motorcycles. And so, I had a motorcycle and I was riding. I rode up to, Huntsville and I was on Highway 30 coming over to College Station. It's like a random Sunday afternoon. And man, I don't have any way to explain it other than it was like, it was like the light bulb came on for the first time ever. Like only thing I can say is I felt like I literally in the blink of an eye suddenly came to life and everything internally changed in that moment. It wasn't a prayer. It wasn't like it was just a 100% shift of person that I got home to that same girlfriend. And even she was like, dude, what is up with you? And I'm like, I don't know, but I feel amazing. I just felt like, and it wasn't like suddenly I'm happy. It was like everything I had been missing was suddenly there, you know? Um, and I really thought it was a mood swing. And so the next weekend rolls around and it's still there. And I'm going to hang out with my friends and we're going to do the things we normally do. And, being really clueless on religion in general. I didn't know what to think of what had happened. I just knew that like I'm hanging around with these guys that I grew up with, and I felt like I oddly didn't fit in. You know, it's like what we always talked about. Suddenly I'm like, that didn't really sound like anything I care to talk about. You know, I didn't care for the jokes we were making, the whole violence thing that I literally, like my whole life thrived on violence because that's just how I gained power, you know? It was
Yeah.
part of what I loved again about hanging out with Drew and Jason and them is they were just chilling, dude. Like they weren't violent people. And I grew up around violent people. You know, my dad was violent, my uncles were violent, so that's all I've known is violence. Um, but I just didn't want it anymore. You know, I I didn't mind drinking a beer, but I'd get drunk and I'm like, I'm not enjoying this like I normally would. And where I think it really shifted for me was a couple months in. I'm at this bar down in Plantersville and I'm hanging out and you remember Duster, right?
Yep.
Yeah, so he drove me out there, me and my girlfriend, and we're hanging out at this bar and they're playing pool. And I'm just kind of chilling at this table. I'm having a few beers. I'm just like I'm literally like, what is wrong with me? You know, like why can I not enjoy this stuff anymore? And I will not forget, dude, this guy comes down the table that was a friend of mine. He's like, hey, dude, I know you haven't messed with it in a while, but I got, I just got an 8 ball of Coke coming. And what do you think? And I just went, I'm done. So I got up, I walked over to Duster, my girlfriend, and said, hey, I swear to you with everything in my being, I am not mad, but I just really want to walk. And so I said, I'm going to hit the road and I'm going to walk down the back roads toward the house. And when y'all come back, just pick me up. And they were like, what? And so it's like 1 a.m., you know, 12:30, 1 a.m. I'm walking down the railroad tracks at night and I'm just talking with the Lord because I'm like, this is the only time in my entire life that I felt like I'm actually alive. Like it's not even a purpose thing. It's not like I was never scared of anything. I just finally felt alive. And so I started pursuing it. In January, like beginning of 2010, pretty much, I really started pursuing it. But at the same time, I was very ignorant of all things spiritual, you know. Um, so I met this guy who was really big into like the charismatic denominations, um, and he had taken me to this worship service at this church on a Friday night that was very charismatic. You know, people are running around yelling in tongues and screaming and falling on the ground and carrying flags, and um, it was a wild environment, man. But afterwards, this girl that was in the worship band comes down to me and she's like, "Oh, have you ever heard of the Agape House of Prayer?" And I'm like, "No." And they were like, "Oh man, like angels show up and like people are being healed and like all this stuff and God's talking to people." And I'm like, "Oh, like I read Acts, so like that seemed legit." So I'm like, "Where? What's the address?" You know? And they're
Yeah.
like, "They're having a service every Saturday. Y'all should go tomorrow night." So we go. And you know, first off, it is literally someone's house, so that was weird. Um, and it's very like you know, it was just it was a really uncomfortable scenario setting all of it. I was not used to it, and so me and two of my friends that went, I was like, I'm uncomfortable. So I went in this little like living space area, and I'm just kind of talking to people in there, and finally my friend who drove us comes in, and I'm like, hey, dude, let's go. Like this is weird, dude. I don't like being here. And we're about to leave, and this lady pops in and she said, hey, Mark, who's like the lead guy of the house, he wants to pray over the new guys. So I'm like, okay. So we go in there and like I don't know what to chalk it up to, man, because I try to be as level headed as I can while also being a man of faith. But this dude told me things about me that I've never told anybody, things about my relationship with my dad that nobody knows about. You know, like I'm crying. I am physically sobbing as this guy is praying over me. And so that sold me because I'm thinking he's a prophet, right? Like this
Yeah.
guy is connected with God. And you know, I got a friend that went in there with me named Philip. He's probably one of my best friends. And to try and just make a really long story short, I was in there for almost a year. But I was sold, you know, like they were like, well, if you want to be a part of this, you have to fast 1 day a week and pray for 4 hours a day. I said, dude, because I was working at Sports Med at the time. So I'm like, I work evening shifts, bro. I can double that, So I was fasting a minimum of 2 days a week. I'd wake up at 5 a.m. I'd get my Bible. I'd go out in the woods and I'd sit out there for 8 hours in prayer, just isolated. And, a lot of their teachings were essentially through prayer, through fasting, through giving up things that we love, such as exercise. God anoints us with extra anointing and authority in the spiritual realm. I had no comprehension really of church history. And so basically what they're teaching me is old school Gnosticism and stuff like that. It's really all it was. It was a lot of different spiritual religions mixed into the name of Christ.
Can you explain
Um,
that? Gnosticism?
yeah. So essentially like the flesh is evil, and the spirit is good. And so since the flesh is evil, what we want is we want to deprive it of what is good, because what we're not Gnostic, coming from the Greek word gnosis, or knowledge. And so what they believed is through this you would achieve a higher enlightenment. And
Okay.
once you achieve this higher enlightenment, you achieve salvation, basically. And that was their whole thing. If we deprive the body, we'll receive basically a higher knowledge of God. He'll begin to speak to us directly. He'll begin to reveal things to us that are more than the Bible, things outside the Bible. Um,
Which at a basic level, if you don't know much about it, makes sense.
makes
Yeah.
100% sense. Yeah. And so, one of the things that really caught me off guard, though, is I have always still been someone who's like, we have to have objective lines because we have to know, what's wrong and what's right. And I didn't really understand the Bible to be canon, or the measuring stick, the objective line of truth. Um, and one day the house leader said that God gave him a vision. And, he would say that every day he would go up to heaven. He'd spend hours up in heaven with God. Like, he had all these stories that I didn't believe everything he said, but what I couldn't ignore was that day when he prayed over me. Like, to me, and I had a real reverence for God. And so for me, I'm like, if he's saying he's a prophet, surely he's like, no one would lie about something that holy. And but he said God gave him a vision, and in the vision he saw this massive diamond just floating in the middle of the air. And he said a light beam came down from above and hit this diamond, and like these tens of thousands, if not hundreds of thousands of facets of light, all different colors, came out of the diamond. And he said God told him that that's the amount of meanings that every single verse of scripture can have. And so now at that point, every verse can mean whatever I want, and you can't tell me otherwise. And so he was really removing all systems of accountability and moving us toward what I say is what really comes from God. He didn't ever cut us off from other churches, but the way that he did it is he said, we want you to go to other congregations, but it's not so that you can be fed. You're fed here. We want you to go to other congregations so that you can deliver spiritual anointing and power to that congregation. And so basically, he's making us think that we're more knowledgeable. So we're not listening, right? We're coming to
Yeah.
give. Um,
Yeah.
and so, he had pulled a text from Acts 5. He basically told us that God told him that if we sin at all anymore and we come into that house, God is going to strike us dead. And I'm like, oh my gosh, because I'm struggling with temptation and sin and all the, and so, man, I was just, it was bad. And he also, they were big on like believing in other anointed men and other prophets. And so you had almost like, they had like their own network, so to speak. And anytime a prophet was in town from their network, you wanted to go see him because that's more anointing when you hear from the prophet. And I think so this is where I started coming out of it. I started getting really mad, because I was without question doing more than every one of them were doing. And every day they're like, oh, an angel came and talked to me today and told me that I should wear this color shirt because I was going to see that. And I'm like, dude, I'm not seeing anything. I'm not hearing anything. I'm not healing anybody. Like, and I'm doing more than every one of you. I don't understand what I'm doing wrong. And they were like, "Oh, just keep going, brother. You'll get there." And finally, one night, I'm driving home from this like prophets thing, and I'm really mad at God, man, like mad. And I'm mad because I'm like, if I'm gonna do like, because everywhere I went, they're just adding more things I have to do to make God happy and to receive this spiritual anointing, you know? And I'm driving home and I'm like having it out with God, man. I'm just so angry at him because I'm like, I like this is a joke, you know, like you're eventually I'm just gonna have to spend my time in an all white room with a Bible in front of me and prophetic worship playing 24/7 with no sleep, no food, no water, nothing if I'm going to attain what you're asking me to do. And I remember just saying like how am I supposed to know what to do? You know, like how am I supposed to know what to do? Because they hadn't even convinced to the degree like if you're driving home, and I did this, I legitimately did this. If you're driving home and you hit a stoplight and you can go left or right, both ways will take you home, just a different route. You cannot go either direction until the Lord tells you which way to go, otherwise you're sinning. Like that's the level. And I'm like, I'm sitting at a stoplight as it goes through 12 times, you know, because I'm like, well, he's not telling me. Like, I don't know what to, and I didn't want to sin, you know. Um, and you know, they're using scripture to back this stuff up, but wildly out of context, you know. And
Yeah.
so anyway, I'm having it out with God this one night, and I remember saying, like, how in the world am I supposed to know what to do? Like, I'm mad, so I'm verbally speaking, you know. And it's the only time in my entire life that I believe I would say God spoke to me. Not I didn't hear an audible voice, but like in my head, I heard the words very clearly. He said, "Why don't you look at my word?" And I was like, I never really thought about that, you know, like so I went home and I just thought I'm going to read First Peter. I don't know why, but I'm going to read First Peter. And so I started reading it, and I'm telling you, bro, first 5 verses contradicted 90% of everything they told me. And so I
Wow.
spent from that point, I spent the next like month or two just reading the letters of Paul. You know, I remember reading Colossians. Dude, you read Colossians 2 is one of the letters that needs the most amount of context to understand it. I understood it perfectly because what Paul's saying not to do is everything they're telling me to do. You know, and I'm like,
Yeah.
what?
He
So
was literally already learned everything, but just
yeah,
in the
yeah,
opposing way.
exactly. And so, um, you know, to make it as simple as possible, what brought me out was just an honest investigation of what God said through his word. Um, Now, it was still difficult, you know, because I'm having to decide, is the Bible right or is that guy right? Because the fear was if I leave there, I'm cut off, you know? Um, but I just thought, I'm like, man, surely God is not this God of mass confusion, you know? Like, and I don't believe that I don't believe God has to follow the law of non-contradiction, but I don't believe God is contradictory. You know, I think he is truth, and truth doesn't contradict itself. And so, um, that's what led me out. And then shortly after that, so now I'm about 2 years into the Christian faith. I'd come across a sermon, it's the weirdest thing, on YouTube. And this guy, the name of the sermon was called Regeneration versus Self Denial. And all I really understood about the Christian faith was self denial, but I still had no comprehension of what on earth happened to me that day on the motorcycle. And he read this passage from Ezekiel 36. And man, I about came out of my chair, you know, because he says it's a prophecy of what God would do in the future days. And he says that he'll remove our hearts of stone and he'll give us a heart of flesh, and he'll put a new spirit within us, and then he'll fill us with his spirit and cause us to walk in his statutes and obey his ordinances. And dude, it's the first time I found like a word for word explanation of exactly that day, you know? And then from there, the Bible started making even more sense to me. Um, so yeah, that's a short, not short version of it, but yeah,
That's wild.
yeah,
Wow. It's kind of interesting because with fitness, with strength training, the
hmm
more you do generally, not overdoing it, but the more you do, the more you get out of it, right? Like
yeah,
if you're working out 1 day a week versus working out twice a day, multiple days, fueling yourself, getting good sleep, doing all the right things, and being younger, of course,
Mhm.
or you can be more resistant to things. That mentality also came into like the cult thing. It's like, oh,
Yeah.
I'm doing more and more, but I'm not getting more and more out of it. Like, how
Yeah.
can you? So it's interesting.
Yeah. It was a wild, and even my journey with fitness through that time, like, because I gave it up for a while, because I thought it was just pure vanity, um, and it wasn't until after, and really, what church was your son baptized in?
He was actually baptized in the San Marcos River.
Oh, that's
So
cool. All right.
my wife went to a Lutheran church
Nice.
in
Okay.
Arlington,
Yeah.
and he married us, and that
Hmm.
was the first time I, I got into. I had like a whenever I was younger, we were leaving Buzzfest, the Woodlands.
Yeah.
There was some beer in the car next to me, so the officers pulled my friend over. He was drinking and driving. I got minor in possession because it was within my reach.
Hmm.
Crazy thing, my mom ended up coming there picking me up. I didn't go to jail. Nothing happened to me, but I did have to go to court for like having a ticket and
Hmm.
do all that stuff. So I had to do community service. I was working at what church is that? It's on 2978, down a little ways from Bear Branch Junior High. I can't remember the name of the church. I think it was a
I, I
Pentecostal church.
I can see it. Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah. So he let me do the pastor there let me do community service, and he was asking me, he's like, so what do you think about God? And and that was the time I was like, I don't I think people put too much emphasis on God, and I think there's it's too complicated. And he's like, oh, you're agnostic, and like later on it's like I was being agnostic but in a different way. Like
Hmm.
it was strange to me. So then the next time I had anything to do with any type of church stuff was I went to my wife's church with her for a candlelight dinner on was that Christmas. First time hanging out with her family. We're hanging out all day long. Her grandfather passed away the year prior, so her mom and her granddad would always drink together, have a good. So I go to church and I'm wasted. I'm
Yeah.
like I've been drinking all morning with her mom
Yeah.
having fun. Then she's like, "Oh, we're gonna go." I was like, I don't want to burn the church down. Like I'm drunk
Yeah.
going to
Yeah.
church. I was like, I felt so awful. But I go in there, I'm like listening. I'm like, well, this is like weird. Like no judgment, right?
Yeah.
And then like some other people were like, yeah, like this is like Lutherans. From what I learned later on, it's like, yeah, like they'll go do things, and you can kind of you don't have to like it's not so hard. Where like some of the and that I guess some of my previous experience with the religiosity of like some of the baptism that I've been around
Hmm.
is if you don't believe in Jesus Christ the way I do, you're going to hell.
Mm. Mm.
And it's
Yeah.
like, so there's no other way to do it. It's like, no, you're going to hell. Like if you do any, like it's all like just that very like um, stereotypical Southern,
Yeah.
like one person knows how to read. They're going
Yeah.
to teach everyone that doesn't know how to read, like what happens. Kind of
Yeah.
cult like, I would
Yeah.
say.
Absolutely.
And so that's why I was kind of blown away from it. But he ended up retiring, Pastor John, he ended up retiring. And then it was like 4 or 5 months later, we're like, well, we want to get Joshua baptized. Could you come down to the river? Like, you don't work at the church anymore. Could you come down? He's like, oh, yeah, he loves the hill country. So he came down, and a bunch, like we had probably 30, 40 people there.
Yeah.
And Lindsay and I love, like, we go to the river every Sunday.
Yeah.
That's,
That's
that's our
fun,
place.
man. Yeah.
So he was like, yeah, let's do it. And then ended up baptizing him in the river. So,
Nice, man.
yeah.
Yeah. So one of the biggest encouragements to my Christian faith has been the guy who was the founder of the Lutheran denomination, Martin Luther, because he had the ability of tying in being a human and having hobbies and having a job and saying like all these things are still sacred. We're not disconnecting our sacred spiritual life with God from those things. They're all sacred. And it's almost like, aside from just a love for strength training, it put a purpose on it too, you know?
Yeah.
And it really made me start thinking even about my training. And it's one of the reasons that I kind of did CrossFit for a season, was because I love the idea of training work capacity. because I thought work capacity is functional and it's valuable to society, right? And so that's been my thing with my training. It's one reason that I never went into bodybuilding. Not that bodybuilding can't have its benefits to the society, because you can be a strong and somewhat functional bodybuilder. But I just thought, man, if we have people in our community that need help, I want to have the strength and the work capacity to be able to serve, during the hurricanes, man, all of it. And so I always had a very militant style of training, because I understood my fitness from a perspective of being a Christian, instead of trying to separate those two things. Um, and so it was even beneficial there. Whereas in that place, it was like, well, this is, and it was condemned so strongly, because they're like, well, this is just your search for vanity. It's your pride. You just want people to see you. And I'm like, I actually kind of don't like attention. Like in high school, I was all about attention, and I don't really appreciate that. I don't enjoy that anymore. Um, which is very difficult when you work in one of the biggest churches in Magnolia, because our town, it's small.
Yeah.
And I already have a personality that's uh, fairly animated, along with a structure that stands out when it walks in a room. Um, but yeah, so it has, man. Um, it's just wild when I start drawing those things, and it's also uh, I forget who it was. I was reading. I've really had to discipline myself to learn how to love reading, and I've begun to love reading. Um, but like, when God created, we believe that He created with wisdom, and so like when I look at the human body and its function, it's part of the reason what I mentioned earlier. Like, I want to see how far I can push my body. Part of that reason is because I believe God created it. When we were kind of free talking right before we kicked this thing off, I mentioned when it comes to like nutrition, wanting to go back, because I even when I was doing CrossFit, part of the reason I went back to strength was because I just thought, I'm not very good at CrossFit, but I'm good at being strong. And like,
Yeah.
what if there's a reason that God created me to be good at being strong? Like, and so even with like nutrition, I started looking back. I did the 23andMe, the little
Yeah.
saliva thing. Because my whole life I thought, I was just told, well, you're half German, and then you're like a quarter Indian and a quarter something, like Native American and a quarter something else. Well, I did this 23andMe. I was 52% Scandinavian. I was 24% Italian, 12% Middle Eastern, and then like a little bit of like Western Asia. I'm like, where did that stuff even come from? And so then I'm like, well, what do those guys eat? When you start looking at that, and I have a huge obsession for Mediterranean food. I think it's some of the best food on the entire planet. But yeah, so when you were talking about that earlier, and like looking back literally at people's DNA and where they come from, that's like some
Yeah.
of the most fascinating stuff to me, man.
Yeah. It's a while. If people don't have a DNA test, there's a problem with like family genealogy, like, right? Like someone told you were German and whatever.
Hmm.
Same thing with me. Like people are like, oh, you're like French and Native American and this and this. And I'm like, looking back, I'm like, I don't really have like my last name is French, Quibido, but I'm only like 24 something percent French.
Yeah.
And so then you like start seeing all so sometimes family um sayings and like with the way things came up don't really align. But generally, if you look at like if you don't want to get a genetic test, I know people have like, oh, I don't want to do that. Like I don't want to know
Hmm.
my future. Like they're concerned about knowing how they're gonna die. I'm like, that's not what it's gonna tell you, but I get it.
Yeah.
If you have generally like people that are born in like around the equator, their family heritage comes around the equator
Hmm.
versus more like European, like not Poles,
Yeah.
not either pole. And then you have the pole people. Generally, you kind of know if you're from those places. So then that can kind of give you a kickstart of like, oh yeah, you should probably have this type of diet. Or typically Asians, I know like there's more bone issues with Asians because they're used to eating more fermented soybeans.
Oh.
Fermented soybeans have higher levels of K2. K2 helps signal where calcium and vitamin D go.
Hmm.
So Asian Americans don't get a lot of K2 because it's not natural in their diet because they're eating generally American diets. They typically if they start working out, running, et cetera, doing stuff like that, they start seeing bone fractures because they don't have enough
Interesting.
K2 to signal where the calcium and the vitamin D need to go. So there's not a signaling pathway for them based on their heritage, tens of
Yeah.
thousands of years of doing that.
And so
So yeah,
because
it's
their ancestors ate that, their body requires this higher amount of K2.
yep,
Is that what it is?
yeah,
That's crazy, man.
yeah. It's like we
Interesting.
were talking whenever we were off before jumping on. People from Mediterranean, uh, Middle Eastern, typically can get away with more, especially like Indians can get away with the vegan diet because they have a longer digestive tract, so they can break down more proteins, more nutrients out of that stuff. Like think about a cow, a ruminant. Different because Indians don't have three
Right.
stomachs,
Right.
but the process is a cow, a gorilla. They have longer digestive tracts. They can break down the plant matter for a longer period of time through the digestive tract, so they're getting more nutrients out of it. That's why you can have a 1,300, 100 pound cow eating nothing but grass and some
Yeah.
supplements, right? So uh,
Gosh.
kind of the same thing with people. Like if you have an Inuit, if they're from cold areas, they're eating well blubber, a lot of meats, a lot of high fats. If you put them on a higher plant-based diet, they're going to get sick and they're going to have issues.
Yeah.
It's pretty wild.
Okay. Man, that is like it's like that's the kind of thing that I always kind of knew was there, but I don't think I ever took it. I more looked at it as like, what did my ancestors eat? I should probably eat that too. But I don't think I
Yeah.
ever considered it even from like that adaptation standpoint, like because that's what they ate, my intestinal tract could be different. I could be absorbing things different. And bio-individuality has always been something that I've been pretty fascinated with. I don't know near enough about it. But I've always been pretty interested. I first found my interest in it, as dumb as it sounds, because of my trashy deadlift, because I'm like, why can I, like, I have a big lats. I train my glutes and my hamstrings constantly. And then I start looking at it and I'm like, okay, well, I have fairly long tibias. I have stupid long femurs. Like my femurs are lengths that I don't even understand. My torso is long but short for my femurs, and my arms are like a foot long. And like my humerus, which is why I'm good at pressing, my
Yeah.
humerus is probably like that long. And so I'm like, that's the problem. Like I have to, it's such a distance to reach down for that bar because of my short arms and my long body. But also, I'm like, everybody's like, well, just deadlift sumo. I'm like, I just don't want to, like nothing. I have no hate on sumo lifters. I don't know, man. Conventional's always been my thing, but
How much how much time do you put into, because you talked about functional training
mhm,
and liking that. I don't like the term functional.
it's fair.
I don't dislike it. I just sometimes it's overused, right? Like
Yeah,
functional for most people, I guess whenever we define terms, then we can say like what it is. So I don't think
sure.
it's good or bad. I think functional is if you're a mom and you have two kids, functional is being able to carry two kids around, do what you need to do. If you have a job doing whatever groceries, like scanning stuff, you
Yeah,
need to be functional for your daily life. I think that's like
absolutely.
functional.
Yeah,
Now, so function can be anything for anyone. If you're a construction worker doing sheetrock, like you need to have overhead pressing capabilities and maintaining that for a long time. If you're a
mhm,
climber, you need to not be able to get tired in your forearms so you can hold on to stuff,
yeah,
small little things. So everyone's function can change at any moment. But I guess where I was going was you were talking about functional movement. Do you ever do any of the do you place any functional patterns in your programming for strength stuff? Like, for example, like the functional, like I'm talking about like the stereotypical stuff now. Do you like um, windmills, kettlebell windmills,
oh right,
uh, Atlas
yeah,
stone stuff? Do you
oh
do any of that
yeah.
stuff?
So I don't have stones, but we do sandbags a lot.
Okay.
I did stones when I was younger. I didn't know, first time ever doing them, I didn't know that they use so much tacky. And so I go to grab the stone, and when I set it, I went to let go, and I thought my forearm skin stayed on the stones. I was like, ah. So I prefer sandbags, but yeah. So
I didn't know they use sticky stuff on
oh, it's
I have
horrible.
stones. I made some stones. I
Oh
don't have
really?
anything on them. Yeah, I
Oh,
have
see,
a
that's what.
170 pound stone. I took
Oh, okay.
a cheap um exercise ball that had
Uh-huh.
like some texture to it,
Yep.
and I made a fiberglass mold of that. That was the first one I made, and it's 147 pounds, I think.
Okay.
And so that one you don't really need anything tacky, and it's light enough weight. I wanted to like learn how to pick it up. Then the second one I made was with the actual Atlas,
Like the mold.
the actual mold. I
Yeah.
forgot the name of the company, but they make like the ones that everyone uses.
Hmm.
And I think that was a 240-pound stone,
That's a big old chunk right there, man.
and it's smooth. So I'm
Yeah.
like, it's so hard to get up because it's
Yeah.
smooth. And I'm like, oh, like I love lifting heavy stuff too. Not to,
Yeah.
I don't think I've ever had the propensity to get as strong as I could potentially get.
Hmm.
I think, I don't know, there's something like whatever my lineage is, I'm really good at seeing what people are doing wrong. And it just like, it instantly makes sense to me. Like,
Yeah.
you're doing this wrong. Like, the coaching aspect of me, that's what I'm great at. That's what I've been gifted with.
Hmm.
I love lifting heavy, but like, I was benching 350 whenever I was 20, 21, 22
Yeah. It's good weight.
uh, for reps.
Yeah.
And then hurt my shoulder, spent 2 years doing no more workouts, just doing all rehab stuff, rehabilitating myself. A doctor told me like I'd need surgery, don't want to go under the knife, scared of medical stuff.
Yeah.
Spent 2 years, got another MRI, and they were like, "What'd you do? Like the body doesn't do like you can't heal yourself." I was like, "Yeah, I spent 2 years and I healed myself basically. No
Nice.
shoulder problems after that." So then
Yeah.
I always went with like I would rather be fully like kind of like the stereotypical term of functional. I want to be able to
Hmm.
move in every position, but
Yes.
also control everything that I can do. Like doing a full depth squat, I'd rather do a full depth squat with 225 on my back than to go quarter or half with 315 or 400. So
Yeah.
that's kind of like been my approach. What do you do with like your programming and that stuff?
Oh, that's a good question.
Do you
So
just lift
right,
heavy?
yeah. Right now, I'm not on a hiatus of working out. I'm on a hiatus of what my normal regimen would be. Um, so in 2009, I was bench pressing. So I did not know how to train well. I remember taking the powerlifting elements that Coach Romanelli taught me, which was essentially a West Side Conjugate method, speed days and max effort days, but I didn't understand the organization of it. And so I was basically doing a week where I would max out everything and a week where I would do like dynamic or speed work. And I didn't, no, no, no. So I had an overhead press day and a bench day, a squat day and a deadlift day. If I went max effort on overhead press, then I'd go speed on bench and vice versa,
Okay.
but I didn't understand deloading. I didn't understand any of that. And so in 2009, I was going for the big three one day. I'd taken a semi couple of days of recovery, and it was a Monday, and I was like, I'm going to go for the big three and just see what my maxes are. So I did a squat. I worked up my squat, which I never count my squat max because I can't make depth anymore. I just kind of see like for my squat, what can I do? But I'll never like if I were to give a total, I'll never include my squat because it's not legitimate. So I'm a purist.
Yeah.
Um, but I'm warming up bench press, and it's really odd because while I'm warming up, I start feeling like this like weird little twinge like right in here. And so I'm thinking in my head, I'm not thinking about like insertion points. So I'm just thinking like, I guess my biceps a little tweaked. So I'm like doing some light rows to warm up and uh, all my warm up sets on bench, I'm doing fine. And so what I did is I worked up. So normally how I max out, I work up to a 90% of, well, back then I did 90% of what I thought I could get. Now I do 90% of what I know I can get. So I worked up, assumed 405 was about a 90% at the time because 2 weeks before that I did 425 for three. So I work up to 405 and I come down. My spotter, he lifts me off, but I told him, I was like, you don't even worry about spotting me. Like, I'll be fine. He's like, oh, okay. So lifts it off and I come down, I touch my chest, I'm pressing up, good bar speed and everything. My pec just rips. And so
Oof.
I fall this way and I dunk the bar over my head barely, and I sit up and it's 405 pounds of iron plate. So everybody at Sports Med is like, and the physical therapy section, they know me. So they're like, what are you doing? I'm like, I don't know what happened. They're like, come back here. So I sit down at this table, take my shirt off. They're like, lift your arm up, like in this position. And I did. And it was like a curtain across my chest. And they were like, yeah, dude, you tore that. So it wasn't a full tear, it was a partial. Um, so it was like, and even still, I have, when I flex my pec, half of it's over here. So they didn't do any repair. All that being said, my wife and I got back into powerlifting about a year and a half ago, probably about a year ago. And, I started getting my bench pretty high up again. And I train a lot of like partial work when I'm doing max effort stuff. Um, and I was up into like the high fours on my partial work. And one day, probably like 3 or 4 weeks ago, something popped. And I was like, oh gosh, I racked the weight. I could feel it, I could feel like that weird pulling sensation. So I'm like, I'll just wait, see if it bruises. I had no bruising, but I would notice anytime I would get anything over 135 pounds on the bar, I just felt unstable with this arm. And so,
Hmm.
I figured it was either some scar tissue broke, that's been there for 15 years, or I did have like a minor tear. So all that being said, for the past couple of weeks, I'm really off program. Um, but what I love, so my favorite things as far as like basic barbell training is the big five. I love, now not big five in full. I love hang snatches. I love hang cleans. I love any kind of overhead press, right? Any kind of jerk, push press, behind the neck, front, doesn't matter. Love it all. So right now, I'm really training the big five. Uh, and what I'll do is I'll train it. I always undulate. I've always been kind of an undulator with my periodization. So I don't really, I have no beef against like a linear periodization. I do believe it works. I think it works well. I just
Yeah.
get bored. I get bored going, well, there's my percentage. So I like to have at least one day a week that I can put on some heavier weight and play around a little bit. Um, so right now, I train 4 days a week. So like Monday, I keep all my percentages on a variation of snatch, variation of clean, and then bench, squat, deadlift. All my percentages stay between 50 and 60%. And I'm just going as fast as I can with that bar. Tuesday, I do a little bit more volume work. So I'll keep my percentages probably around like 70%. Thursday, mid 70%. And then tomorrow I get to throw some things. So,
Do you have any shoulder issues with snatches, or is your
yeah.
shoulder lat and everything? Is it pretty solid?
So my right shoulder, because of the pec tear,
Yeah,
um,
can't go into
I,
full
yeah,
extension.
yeah. So my, especially when I'm bench pressing, I have to really focus on getting my, left scap flat, and really kind of externally rotating my humerus, because if not, I'll naturally roll up like that. And so I do notice it when I snatch. I'll spend quite a bit of time just in that overhead position, really like trying to think about facing my armpits forward, getting that external rotation. Um, so I do quite a bit, and that's so tomorrow. Tomorrow I will. So on Saturdays I'll alternate between the snatch and the clean, which one I max out, and the other one I don't even mess with. Then I'll do some form of I alternate whether I'm doing an overhead press or bench press. Tomorrow will be my first day in 5 weeks to try some heavy variation of a chest press. Um, so I'll probably warm up. Yesterday I did 305 for a few sets of three, and it felt fine. So I think, you know, but so that being said, in my normal training, do you know who the Wall Street weightlifter is?
No.
So he goes by Wall Street weightlifter. His name is Graciano Rubio. He has a method that he calls the 50-to-1 method that really kind of tracks with like uh, Dan John, who's an old Olympic throwing coach. Yeah, yeah,
Familiar with him?
yeah. So Dan John, the 5-3-1 method, very simple. Like hit a top set, hit a couple of accessories, get out the gym. Stop adding more lifting to your workout and just keep it short and sweet. So what I had done is I kind of structured something. Do you know what the cube method is?
No.
So the cube method is like if you take West Side Barbell with like your speed work, your max effort work. A guy named, I think it's Brandon Lilly, created something called the cube method, where instead of doing speed work and max effort work every week for your lifts, he has kind of a rotation. So like in 1 month, or no, in 3 months, you'll max out your bench 3 times. And then on those other days, it might be volume or it might be speed. Um, so I basically took a mock version of the cube method for my main lifts. So like Monday I'll squat, and it, maybe like, so let's say I get back on normal regimen this coming week, for example. Monday I'll come in, I'll hit a max effort squat variation of some form. The following Monday, I believe, is a speed squat. So I'll do banded work between 50 and 60% for like 10 sets of 2 fast. The next
Yeah.
Monday will be a volume day. So now it's like probably between 70 to 85% for like 3 sets of 6 or 3 sets of 10 or something like that. Then back to max effort. So if my squat day is heavy, my deadlift day won't be. But what I've done is I've had it to where Monday is my squat day, Thursday is my deadlift day, and then Saturday is like an Olympic variation. So like hang snatch, hang clean. And
So a
then
normal cycle for you is a 3-week period?
yeah, 3 week.
Okay.
I do like a 3 week wave. Yeah. Um, and then if I feel bad, I'll deload. If I feel good, I'll continue forward. I try like that behind the neck push jerk or push press that I did. Uh, I also try not to hit true maxes unless I'm in a meet. Um, so I'll go, 95%, but I try not to hit like absolute maxes just to kind of
What RIRs do you do whenever you are maxing out? Are you doing like
probably like one.
one? Yeah.
Yeah. Like I'll keep 1 rep in the tank probably.
Okay.
Because if I do it like that, my deloads don't have to be as frequently, maybe like every 5 or 6 weeks versus like every fourth week.
Yeah.
But I, on my, so we're, getting to your functional question, what I'll do is like, let's say it's a squat day. I'll do whatever my squat work is that day. I'll follow it up usually with like a camber bar good morning or something like that. Because my weak spot is my low back. Like everything else in my posterior chain's great. My low back is trash. Um, and then after that, I'll grab, it'll vary. Are you familiar with Alex Viata, the hybrid athlete? So
No.
he's a like a world record holder power lifter, but he also does ultra running, Ironman triathlons, like all kinds of stuff. So if he has like a heavy squat day, then his running that day is going to be shorter and more intense. If he has a volume squat day, his running that day will be longer and less intense. So he matches his conditioning to his strength.
Okay.
And so let's say I have a heavy squat day on Monday, then maybe after I do my squats and good mornings, I'll get a sled, I'll get a sandbag, and maybe a kettlebell, and I'll set up like maybe a little 7-minute AMRAP where I'll say, okay, 60-yard sled pull, um, 60-yard sandbag carry to over shoulder, and 10 kettlebell swings. Get as many rounds as I can. And so, because I do
So are you only
believe,
doing like 2 or 3 workouts for those max effort days?
as in like exercises that day.
Yeah, like total exercises that day, or are you doing other stuff too?
So
Like if you're doing squats, like on a squat day, and you're trying to get like up to your max effort days,
yeah, if I'm,
what's the whole day look like for?
oh yeah, it's a good question. Um, so I start out with something called a winning warm up. I don't know if you know who Matt Winning is.
Nope.
Um, so
Learning
he
all kinds
created
of new
this.
names.
Okay, yeah. He kind of came up with a system of warm up where you would take 3 movements and you're going to put them in a circuit, and you're going to go 4 sets of 25 per movement. And so if I'm starting out with squat, then I will start out with something that's a squat pattern. So like a belt squat machine or something like that. Um, and then you pick 2 weak muscles. And so I'll do like a belt squat. My hips are weak, so I'll do like something for my hips to strengthen, something for my like my glute mid and stuff like that. And then I'll do an ab because my abs are just like, for some reason they just are horrible.
That's
Um,
what I was thinking whenever you're saying your lower back
mhm.
is weak. I was wondering about your like transverse abdominis and stuff like that,
Yeah,
like the deep inner core and the
yeah,
whatnot.
yeah. They were so. I actually several years ago I herniated a disc in my L5S1 herniated transverse on my sciatic nerve. Went to physical therapy at Sports Med, and the one thing they said, "What do you do for transverse abs?" I'm like, I don't even know what that is. And so they start showing me all this stuff. They, said, okay, with a transverse herniation, rotation is probably not a good idea while your back hurts. So we want to work anti-rotation. And so they
Yeah.
start teaching me all this stuff, and I'm like, man, this is brilliant. Now I did abandon it for a while. So I've come back into it though. So, and part of the reason is like at the time when I abandoned it, man, my workouts, like it's like heavy squat, supplemental deadlift, posterior chain, lunge, leg press. And it's like by the time I'm done, I'm like, I don't want to do abs. Like I'm just going home. So that's one reason I did cut down my accessory work. So like a warm up for me on a squat day, I might do uh so let's say a belt squat, some hip abduction, and maybe like a banded ab pull down or something like that. 4 sets of 25 all the way through, with no break. The weights are light enough. It's never failure, right? The whole point is blood flow. So like if I'm doing bench press, I might get some dumbbells and I'll go 4 sets of 25 with some dumbbell bench, a band press down, and maybe like a rear delt fly. But on that dumbbell press, like the only goal is blood flow. If you're going until you're failing, you warmed up wrong.
Yeah.
So a lot of my like I would say my warm up is its own like GPP. Like I get some conditioning in my warm up, but I make sure it doesn't take more than 12 minutes. Like 12 minutes is like my cutoff time. Um, so then if I'm doing max effort squat, I'll start warming up my squat from there. Whatever bar I'm going to use, I'll put it on. I'll put 45s on usually, and I'll just work like doubles or triples, climbing up until I think I'm going to be at uh, a max. I'll max out, usually having one rep in the tank, somewhere between the 1 and 3 rep max. Um, Sometimes, depending on how I'm feeling, I'll do back down sets. So I might drop 20% and do like 2 sets of 3 or something like that. And then I'll switch to a good morning. So then I'll do good mornings for like probably like 3 or 4 sets of 6 to 10 reps. And then after that, it's conditioning. But in my conditioning, I'm going to pick movements that will supplement or feed to my back squat. So like some form of a lunge maybe, or a sled pull, or a dead ball carry, or a dead ball over the shoulder, kettlebell work, swings, all that stuff. So like my conditioning will be like some quad work and posterior chain. I'll mix something that's like a higher cardiac output with some kind of like uh, uh, more isolated bodybuilding stuff. And I don't do my upper body days. I don't do conditioning. It's my squat day, my deadlift day, and then my Olympic day. I'll do conditioning on those days.
Okay.
Yeah.
That's kind of so. I try to do this. I know people always ask me about warm up stuff. I don't. I used to do the whole. I would foam roll
Hmm.
body parts I'm going to work out. I used to do legs one day, push one day, pull one day. Now I do full body every time I work out.
Oh, nice.
So I'm doing squats, so I'll do a squat day. That'll be like my dominant day. I'll have a deadlift day, and then I'll do a lunge day. So that's
Hmm.
like my first exercise: squat, deadlift, lunge, and then the next exercise would be um, overhead press, incline press, Swiss ball press.
Hmm.
So it's like I'm keeping the same form, but I'm doing full body workouts every third day, 3 days a week. But I'm working out 5 to 6 days a week.
Okay.
But for warm up stuff, I normally get people if they're gonna max out. I do a method of what is it 12, 8, 4. So take a weight that is 40% of your one rep max projected. Like, so
Hmm.
plug in whatever your projected is. Most of the time, I don't have people do maxes unless they're, or max efforting at, I normally do 2 rep max instead of 1 rep max because so many
Hmm.
people it's so hard to tell like where they are. But if people are doing a 5 set of 5 and they're getting up in weight, I feel like that's a pretty good indicator. If people are doing 8 sets or 8 reps to 10 reps, I don't like those numbers. I'd rather get them lower so I can see like what a better projection is. I created my own 1 rep max calculation, which I
Okay.
think is better than some because a lot of them are conservative because I don't want people to go too high. And then
Yeah.
some of them are just really off. So the one that I created uses all of them together to create like a better standard deviation of like what their 1 rep max should be.
Okay.
And it's more appropriate for like you're putting in body weight, you're putting in what reps they're doing. And so it seems more accurate that way. But I'll have them do 12 reps at 40% their 1 rep max. And then they'll do 8 reps at 75% 1 rep max. Because ideally, like if you're doing 12 reps, you should be able to do 25 reps at 40% 1 rep max, right? Like you should
Yeah.
be able to do 20. You're doing
Yeah.
like almost half of that. So with 8 reps, you should be able to get in at least 12 reps. So 75% of 1 rep max, you should be able to do 12 reps, 10 to 12. And then, I mean, these are all guidelines, so it's not like hard numbers.
Sure.
And
Sure.
then 4 reps, you should be able to do about 8 reps, 8 to 10 reps. And that's kind of doing the same thing where you're getting the neural drive, muscle pumping full of blood for the first 12 because you're just getting the muscles moving and you're practicing the movement. 8,
Hmm.
you're starting to put some weight on there. You're getting that central nervous system drive,
Yeah.
and some blood flow from the residual. And then on the 4, now you're really starting to prime. But then whenever it comes to max effort attempts, we're going to go, if we're going to do 5 to 6 reps, sets, 5 to 6 reps,
Hmm.
the first set would be like our 95%. So like we can see like, are we moving the way we should be moving? Our next
Yeah.
97. And then now we have like 3 left in the tank where we can try 1 rep maxes.
Yeah.
Like, can we actually get it up? No. Was something off? Were we in a weird position? Let's rest for 5 minutes and get back to it.
Yeah.
Can you do it again? No, you can't. Okay, let's drop, 5 pounds, 10 pounds, whatever the number is based on what you're doing.
Yeah.
Can you do it now? And then now let's go up again. So that's kind of my projected way of helping people do like 1 rep maxes. So you're kind of getting the blood flow, but I also have them go through because I was kind of going with like warm ups. I don't like the idea where people are jumping on a treadmill for 10, 15 minutes to get their core
Yeah.
temperature up. Like I want you to do movements that are
Yes.
going to prepare you for the movement you're doing.
Yeah.
But we also need, have you ever heard of a FRC, functional range conditioning?
I don't think so.
Okay. Super cool. I want to take you through some of the stuff.
Okay.
Basically, if we have a capsule, we have this stuff here is connected to this arm stuff here, right?
Hmm.
There's capsules between the 2 joints or to the bones.
Yeah.
With lifting a muscle, we can target the bicep all day long, and we can focus on the chest and we can work on the rotator cuff muscles, all the different things, but we never work on the capsule strength itself. So the capsule doesn't get blood flow.
Interesting.
If
Okay.
we damage a muscle, we can spend 4 to 12 weeks, depending on the person and the severity of the damage of the muscle tissue, for that to recover.
Yeah.
With joint and ligament stuff, you're looking at 3 to 6 months. Bone stuff, a year or longer, right?
Yeah.
Because of blood flow and the connectivity, the connective tissue allowing, it's just so it's not
dense.
innervated with enough blood vessels to get
Yeah.
repair in there. So if we work on that capsule strength, we're getting more neural drive and we're also increasing blood flow to the capsule. If we're
Hmm.
getting blood flow to the capsule, we're getting faster recovery and faster repair. And we're also, so like if you do yoga, right, we can be super flexible, but then you put a 5-pound dumbbell on someone's hand and a full, let's say a fly, they
Yeah.
snap off their shoulder.
Yeah.
Like, well, it's only 5
Yeah.
pounds. Yeah, they're super flexible.
Right.
Now, if you take someone, West Side barbell guys, get them to do a fly, and it's like, why can't you go down anymore? Because like
Yeah.
there's just so much mass and meat on the chest, like you
Yeah.
just can't go back that far. So the idea with working on the capsule, you can put 100% effort into the capsule, which you can't, like, even if you're doing a 1 rep max, you can't fatigue the muscle at 100%
Okay. Yeah.
because you rip the muscle. And there's
Yeah.
so many other structures going on. Like you're ripping muscle, you're ripping connective tissue, you're ripping different things, bones. You could have muscles ripping off of bones. Like there's so much stuff going on that you can't really, like a 1 rep max is never going to 100% activate all your muscles. Like it's
Yeah.
just not a possible thing. That's why, like some people, like you've heard of the mom with the adrenaline dump pushes a
Yeah.
car off a baby, right?
Yeah.
She's not that strong, but she's that strong whenever there's that much adrenaline and cortisol spiking the system, she can lift that much weight. So it's possible. But
Yeah.
then they're bruised all over their body because they used every single muscle and ripped, connective tissue
Right.
off
Yeah.
their bone.
Yeah.
So if we do a 1 rep max, we're not doing 100% muscle activity. But with the FRC, we can actually get to closer to 100% of that capacity
Hmm.
for recovery and neural drive. Because like you've trained people, right?
Oh yeah.
If someone's never worked out, the first year of them lifting, they're getting crazy strong, but they're not putting on that much size
Right.
because it's all neural drive. Like they don't
Yeah.
know how to use their muscles yet, but they're just learning how to do the movement
Yeah.
and they're just getting stronger at doing it. So with FRC, it's really like looking at how can we get more neural drive. So then with neural drive, you can get more power output at all those ranges of motion.
Interesting. So what's an example of something you would do inside of FRC?
Okay, so I don't have it here. You can imagine.
Okay.
Let's say I have a stick. I don't have a stick. Let's say I have a stick. I'm holding a stick down. I go into full, like I'm trying to get my shoulder up as high as I can possibly get it.
Hmm.
From that position, I'm going to then reach higher into that position. So I'm working only on the musculature and the connective tissue going deeper into that range of motion.
Yeah.
If I do an isometric curl, hold right here at 90 degrees, I'm going to get stronger about 15 degrees of motion from this 90 degrees. So I'll be a little bit stronger up here and I'll be a little bit stronger down here. If I go up here, I'll be a little bit stronger here and here. FRC is working on a similar principle as that. You're working on in-range motion, which if you have stronger in-range motion, you have stronger overall motion. Because if you're like, if I get you in a fly and I don't know, like let's say you can do 100-pound flies. You could probably do 150-pound flies, but not go all the way down because you're stressed at 90 degrees.
Yeah.
So if we put on 25 pounds and you can go all the way down to 90 degrees and then come back up, well, you're not getting a lot of work up here, but you're getting a lot of work at the end.
Hmm.
Well, now what if we put 25 pounds here and then you could go down, but then you got locked out by something. Like you're under a bench and you can't go up any higher. Well, then you can put all the isometric drive into it. You're not going to rip anything because you literally can't move that position. So that'd be like another method of it.
And so you would implement things like that into your warm up, correct?
That's a warm up. So that way you're getting blood flow is good, right?
Mm-hmm.
Like what you were saying, you need blood flow because you need to hydrate the fascial lines.
Yeah.
If the fascial lines aren't hydrated, because a lot of people look at dead cadavers whenever they look at fascia. So it's just connective tissue doing whatever it's doing. Living fascia is a very wet, slippery surface. It's a lot of fluids, electrolytes are moving throughout it. It's communicating. You want to get the muscle primed up with good blood flow so the fascia is moving better so you can move more appropriately. You're not demanding anything through your brain, through your central nervous system to say, hey, I need to get ready for this.
Right.
So a good way, another like descriptor of what you could do, like let's say you have someone that they're trying to max out on a 5x5, 135 back squat. Before I get them to do the 135 back squat, say it's a 5'3" female, 120 pounds. She can't do the 135 back squat. I'm going to put 225 on the bar because I know she can pick it up. I know she can hold it. Like I'll make sure she can hold it before, like just get it out of the rack. Like don't pull it out of the rack, just get it out of the rack and hold it. You're holding 225. You've never felt that before. You have all this spinal compression. your nervous system's freaking out because you're trying to maintain not collapsing.
Yeah.
You're not doing anything muscularly, but your central nervous system saying, hey, we don't need to die under this weight.
Yeah. Yeah.
Take that weight off, put 135 on, and they're like, this feels so easy
Mm-hmm.
because they have a neurological drive from their brain through their cervical, through their lumbar, through their, sacral, all the way down, saying like, this is how we need to fire these nerves. The nerves are now prepared to go to lift heavy weights. So whenever I do that, they're like, oh, this is so much easier.
Yeah.
Like, yeah, it's not easier because your muscles are bigger. It's easier because the way I like to describe neural pathways, if you've never done something before, Turkish get up, if you ever, or kettlebell swing, that's a great one. A lot of people that have never worked out before don't know how to kettlebell swing.
Yeah.
The more they practice it, the better they get at it. That's like a hard movement with a lot of, it's a simple movement, but there's a lot of confusion in it.
Yeah. Well, it's like core to extremity.
Yeah.
Yeah.
The way I describe it is like if you're going through a forest and no one's ever gone through it before, there's no path. So you have to take a machete. You cut through that path. Then you have something small that you can go through. Now, if you go through that path 100 times, that opening gets bigger and bigger and bigger. And now you can take 3 or 4 people. You can start taking vehicles down it. Then you put a highway on it. Now you have a path, right? Like you're creating more allowance of things to travel to and from.
Yeah.
So if we stress the central nervous system, specifically the neurological drive of the body, we can get more output because now we're maximizing the stuff that will give you more output as opposed to stressing the stuff that can't, like a muscle.
Right. That makes sense.
Like your muscles have to be big to lift a lot of weight,
Sure.
but at the same time, like you can't have a 5'6" girl that weighs 95 pounds lifting a lot of weight. Like that's just not going to be probable.
Yeah.
But
so do you think on that idea of like the 225 on the bar, lift it, now 135, do you think that ties to something with like supercompensation?
it's acute.
Okay.
With supercompensation, because explain what you mean, because I'm thinking of supercompensation like if I do high demands for 1 week, supercompensating, like I'm almost getting to that point where I'm burned out. Is that what you're talking about?
Well, so that would be like a more macro. So I'm thinking of it from like European track and field. They would discover, so like they built these like monster sets for supercompensation where like I would put like 85% on a back squat and I do like 3 to 5 reps. Then I would do like a medicine ball box jump for 3 to 5 reps. Then I would do a lighter lunge for 3 to 5 reps. And then I would do like a band assisted jump for like 3 to 5 reps. And you would take 30 seconds in between each thing because the idea is like you plug your central nervous system. So like when I had read about it,
so kind of like the idea of reciprocal inhibition.
Yes, exactly that. So they would say like you're basically you're hitting the stress to where the wave's going below performance level, but then what it's going to do is roughly 60 to 90 seconds later, as it comes back up, it's slightly going to go above normal performance level before it levels out. And so they try and capture that because the idea is if you, for that, 3 seconds can train above what you're actually capable of, that will carry over long term. I also found out that it's obviously it's a fairly dangerous way to, train, especially all the time. But what you're saying is definitely slightly different because you're not saying we're going to put 225 on her back and make her squat it, right? She's going to hold it. Then we're going to go down to a weight that she can, that is attainable for her. And even, so what do you think the break time is? So from 225 to 135, how long would you?
Instantly.
Okay. Yeah. That's what I was thinking too,
because you're not doing the squat, right? Like you're just putting it underneath your spine. You're loading your spine. So like 135, then we'll put 45 pounds both on each side. So it's easy to pull off.
Mm-hmm.
Get underneath it, hold it. You are working some muscles, but you're standing there. It's like stabilizer muscles.
Yeah.
You're just basically firing everything up, like ready to go. Rack it, take the weight off. You're probably not going to spend more than like a minute resting.
Mm-hmm.
You don't really need rest because you don't Your heart rate's not elevated, your muscles aren't fatigued, like nothing's going on yet. Then whenever you put, like, you're probably going to have a cortisol dump and some adrenaline dump, which is
Yeah.
fine, because then whenever we put you under the 135 that you can do, then you go to do it, and
Yeah.
probably 30 seconds, I would assume, would be like 1 minute would be max. But by the time you re-rack the weight, pull the weights off, then they can just jump straight into the
Yeah.
squats.
I might try that with my wife. And the reason I say that is because her squat and deadlift are moving up pretty quickly. Her bench press, man, she'll rep 125 as soon as I put 45s on. I'm like, I know it's in your head. I know you can get it. So what I may do is try like a 165, 175, just, pin press it up,
Yeah.
then pull that off and have her do one. Because I know she'll get it.
Does she have a sticking point lower?
Yeah, I'd say her sticking point, and part of it, I think. So I've been having her do. To answer your question, yeah, her sticking point is definitely almost right off the chest. Part of that, I think, is because she lacks that explosive aggression off the chest with bench, especially when because we pause bench in
Yeah.
competition. Um, I've had her doing almost like a plyometric version of bench press at somewhere between like 30 and 40%. So I'll have her like almost drop the weight, and right before it hits her chest, to have her reverse it up. Um, After, obviously I want her pecs very warmed up before that, because that's how you tear a tendon off the bone. But yeah, I'll keep the weight light. At first we start doing it with just a medicine ball, just lay on the, I'll drop it, she'll throw it up, real instantaneous. Um, but
She might not have it. It sounds like, if my wife's the same way. Like, she was doing hex bar deadlifts. She's at the phase now. She's a 400-meter runner. She's in
oh
season right now. She's like she's starting to peak at this point. She's about like we don't know her full peak potential. She's postpartum, so like everything's changing. She ran through college, junior high, like she's ran forever.
yeah,
But being postpartum, now being like in a full season of like actively trying to get like below a 60-second 400, we have her like with squats and stuff. We're not going full squats because we don't need to. Like, that's not going to improve running. Like, I'd rather her do quarter squats at this point, because that's going
absolutely,
to improve her running, because
yeah,
it's more weight. But with her, she did hex bar deadlifts with the higher bar pull.
hmm
Last week she did 200 on the deadlift, which is good for her. I think she could do 240, but I think there's, like you were saying, like the mental thing
yeah,
going on.
yeah,
I think females could potentially, like, some females do have that. I guess anyone. Typically, I've seen females like with a little more resistance there, of like that mental, like, I don't think I can do it, so I can't do it. Like,
hmm
I know you can do it. Everything looks good. Like, you can do it.
yeah,
So one thing I would think with her, instead of like, she has the explosion, right? Like you said, like maybe you take the bar with the weight she can do, have the safety bars 2 inches above where her output is. Then she's going from the chest and she's pressing up 2 inches. So she's activating everything. And then she's pressing as hard as she can into the bar at her sticking point.
hmm
You're going to get that 15% muscle improvement, which is going to be 2 inches down.
yeah.
So from doing that by pushing into a bar in an isometric, let her relax and try to throw some more weight on, see what happens.
That's
I
a
mean,
good
doing
idea.
both, doing like the 175, holding it so she's familiar, because it could be she has some core deviation issues where just getting 175 could be like rocky for her. So
Yeah,
stabilizing that could be the one factor that like she needs, and that would make her feel more confident. Or if that doesn't work, my next progression would be, have her do the weight she can do, 2 inches above that, block off something and press into that block.
okay, I like that. I
Because
might.
then you're not, because sometimes like putting that much weight, I had to do that with my wife. I'm like, let's, like, putting heavy weights on the rack for her just to hold.
hmm
She doesn't want to do it because there's too much stress and she doesn't think she can. So I don't want her to do something that she is already
Yeah,
stressed out about.
yeah,
So if she
that's a good point.
is willing to do the 175 and you hold it over her, then like do that first and see what happens, because that could
Yeah,
help too.
yeah. Um, so what's your wife's best 400 time? Do you know?
In college, I think she ran I want to say 58
It's
something.
crazy to me, dude.
Yeah.
I
She ran um, junior high through college 400, 800. That was her two
okay.
events.
Yeah.
Awful. 800 is the worst event anyone could ever run.
Yeah.
After that, she still loved running. So she got into marathon training and then did that. Then was doing 5K stuff. And she has like 50,000 something followers on Instagram. And she loves sharing her story of running. And she's like, everyone likes the marathon stuff. Like, I don't love it. I like the
Yeah.
short stuff. And so for
Yeah.
her, it's a completely different world. And people are like, you're running a, 3 second or a 350 mile. She's like, yeah, but I'm
Yeah.
only running it for a quarter of the mile.
Right. Yeah. Yeah. Man, that's I am fascinated. Like I wish that I was a 400-meter athlete. I really do. I think the 400-meter athletes, like their output and their work capacity is just, I've never met a 400-meter athlete that didn't like, I think that they are, okay. If you take someone who has trained the 400 and they were a good 400 athlete, I think they can be some of the most versatile athletes in, the different realms of sports, I
Fitness in
guess.
general. Yeah.
Yeah, because I mean, they just have there's a switch that those guys and girls are able to turn on that man, I remember uh, in my CrossFit days thinking like I want to try and get close to a 60-second 400. I think the fastest I ever got was like a minute 28. Because I get going and I either burn myself too early or I start rounding that final corner and I don't have that switch to keep like I had a kid that I trained in powerlifting. So I got a hold of him when he was in 8th grade. He was also in the student ministry. And I saw him at the gym one day. He looked real sad. And I was like, what's wrong? He's like, I got cut from the basketball team. I'm like, okay. He's like, I'm the only student that got cut from the basketball team, like in 8th grade, A, B, and C team. So he's
Wow.
like all upset. I was like, well, what about other sports? And he's like, I'm just not. Like, I've tried. So I said, well, have you ever tried powerlifting? He's like, I don't know what that is. I said, squat, bench, dead, 1 rep max. Like, because normally people who are uncoordinated, they can pick up a weight,
Yeah.
bilateral blast it. But so one day, he was probably a sophomore in high school. I'm putting him through a leg workout. We're at the gym and I'm hitting his legs hard. It was a max effort day. So he's really going into it. And he's a real, like, he often doesn't understand how hard something can be. Like he actually thinks that he would challenge Serena Williams in a tennis match. Like he thinks that like I think I could actually hold my own. I'm like, no, Matthew, you won't score a point. But he doesn't get
Yeah.
it. So he's running his mouth one day. We're talking about the 400, and I said, man, I think anybody that can hit even near 60 is like that's impressive. He's like, I'd smoke 60 seconds, like one lap, that's nothing. So I'm telling him like, well, one day we'll go to the track fresh. I bet money you won't break 60. So he could start. I'll do it right now. I'll go right now. I said, Matthew, you're doing legs. Like, no. Well, he talks me into it. So after we work out, we go down to the junior high, and that homeboy after a leg workout, no refreshment, nothing, ran a 64. And I was like,
Jeez.
oh, like doesn't even train, running at all. He's a
Whoa.
power lifter. Um, and so I told him, I was like, I
We just
think
found your sport.
literally, man. And I told him, I said, dude, I guarantee you, I could train you for powerlifting and for 400, and you could still excel really well in both. Because I think a 400 is still explosive enough to be
Yeah.
beneficial, especially in the realm of a 1 RM. And so he stuck to it for a couple of weeks, but he just hated running. So he's like,
Yeah.
nah, I don't want to do that. But
Programming
yeah,
is wild. Like her training 150 repeats. Like she'll do 3 or 4 150 repeats or like
gosh.
my favorite workout that she does, not that I like it. I I hate running.
Mm,
I like the concept of it is broken 400s or broken 350s. So she'll run, let's say, a 200, rest for 30 seconds, and then do or sorry, let's say 400, so I can keep my numbers right. She'll do
yeah,
a 300, rest for a minute, and then do 100, and then rest for 10 minutes.
interesting.
Yeah. Because then And you can even do that even shorter. You could do like a 300, max effort 300, rest for 30 seconds, do 100. And if you do that, you're really working on like end race, because the epoch, like your body for 30 seconds is trying to calm down and you're still metabolically processing stuff. And then you
Yeah.
try to run 100 meters, like you're dead. Like
Yeah.
your time's going to be super slow, but
Yeah.
it's so good for the end of the race because so many people break down at the end of the race.
Yeah.
So yeah, she puts in like a mile of work a day. And so like
Dang. Yeah.
I like that type of stuff. Whenever she's doing like 5K stuff, she'd do 1,500, 1,600 repeats, like
Yeah.
4 sets of 4.
Yeah.
It's like, oh,
That
I
sounds
don't
horrible,
like.
man. Yeah. So that broken 400 or breakup, whatever you call that, it reminds me of like rest pause training.
Yeah.
It's very similar to rest pause, which is again, it's a solid way to blast through a failure spot and still get more reps in. So that's cool, man. I wish I had so when I was running, I enjoy training running at 400s and less, so like maybe one day I'd go to the track and I'd run a 4x400 with a 1 minute break or 2 minute break or three, depending on how intense I'm trying to go.
Yeah.
But one day I'd run 400s. The next day I might run hundreds. And then maybe one day I'd go and just do just jog a mile and a half, but I loved training like that because that was just a level of work capacity. And I think I would argue running is probably one of the most athletic things we can do, as humans. Um, and so I was doing it for a while, man, and I loved it. But with my knee, um, I've got so much arthritis buildup underneath my patella and like under my patellar tendon. So like that is the thing and for some odd reason, an RDL. I don't know why. Deadlift doesn't hurt. Romanian deadlift is like death, man. Like it feels like there's glass under my kneecap every rep. So I guess because I'm having to like contract my knees back as much as I can,
Yeah.
but yeah,
I would
but I
love,
miss it.
you need to come out one day and do a full assessment.
Yeah,
It's like a full workup. And
dude,
I
that'd be
would
a
love to like
blast,
just
man.
play around with like there's so many like small little intricacies, like going back into a little bit like what I do. Like, for example, like if someone has, say, 90% hearing out of their right ear and 100% hearing out of their left ear, naturally they're going to turn towards you with the ear that they can hear 100% out of.
Right.
If they're like that at whatever age, like say they started that at 12, like they just always had one ear discrepancy, just 10% difference, that can create muscular scoliosis down the system. And they don't even know they
Interesting.
have it.
Yeah.
Now, if they're turning to the right, that's going to put stress on their thoracic spine this way. So it's going to shut down their liver because their liver has to be smaller because of the rotation here. Now that's going to make, the stomach on this side open up a little bit more. So they probably won't have digestive issues, but they might have some liver breakdown.
Yeah.
They also might not be able to squat all the way because they're getting nerve shut down lower in their spine because of their cervical spine. Because if you have a little bit of cock up here and that's shutting down this side, now your left side your left hip is going to be weaker. So you might not be able to get into like a full hip flexion on your
Right.
left side because there's not enough communication there.
Dude, that
So
is wild.
yeah, that's the stuff
Interesting.
that's like fun. Like looking at people that can do. That's why I like working with her. Before I even went to college, I was watching a guy on YouTube, and I always wanted my strength and conditioning certification. Like that to me was like the pinnacle of like I was like, that's
Yeah.
so cool.
Yeah.
Finally got it, and I was like, I knew so much more than what they're offering in the CSCS that I was
Hmm.
like I'm glad I have it. Like it's cool to say like Anthony Q
Yeah.
CSCS, and people are like, oh, like your stuff. I'm like,
Yeah.
I mean, taking the test was a hard test. I studied for like, I don't know, 2 full months. And
Hmm.
like, I just already had so much education in neuroscience and all that stuff. But whenever like the fitness, I'm like looking at them like they're, I've learned so much more beyond that test was just a cool to like have the letters behind my name. But other than that, I know so much more. I know beyond what they were teaching in the CSCS,
Yeah.
certification stuff.
Yeah.
That it's like you're just learning programming. And
Hmm.
I'm a fanatic about, I love all programming. Like
Yeah.
listening to people's programs so interesting to me because it's like,
Yeah.
oh, like my brain's just going like, oh, how would I tweak that to improve outcome,
Yeah.
potential for people? And then how do
Yeah.
we change biomechanical advantages for people with like longer femurs, longer tibias?
Hmm.
What's going on in the hips, like with the FRC stuff? Like, could we get more external rotation on you? Could we get maybe your internal rotation just a little bit weak? And if we increase strength in your internal rotators, then you have more range of motion in your external rotation,
Interesting.
stuff like
Yeah.
that. Because people
Gosh,
are like,
dude.
you need to squat in a certain way. And I'm like, everyone's bones are different.
Hmm.
Before I do anything with anyone, like lay on your back, bring your knees up. Like if you're squatting, like on your back and you're doing like a leg press, bring your knees up and see where your knees fall. If they come close to your chest or far out, that's about where your bones are probably most happy. So let's start squatting there.
Yeah.
Your feet could be 45 degrees out, they could be straight. Whatever
Hmm.
you look down and see, start squatting from that position. We can
Yeah.
adjust accordingly.
So,
So,
when I was at Sports Med, I was training a kid. I was trying to get him to do Bulgarian split squats. And, at the time I'm thinking like, well, foot always has to be straightforward, right? And he kept falling. He could not stand like that. And this older guy that worked out there, Dale Spence, he had a doctorate in some exercise science as far as it could go. He was also an Olympic athlete in the 400.
nice.
He was probably 84 at the time. So, this was way back in the day, but he comes over there and he says, "You mind if I?" Because I was a hired personal trainer, so he didn't want to overstep. He said, "Do you mind if I offer some advice?" I said, "Sure." He said, "Hey, take your foot and point it slightly out, son." Kids banging out Bulgarians without falling, and I'm like, "What the heck?" And he's like, "I know what the literature will often teach, but," he said, "he walks already with his toes out. So trying to make him do this for a movement like that just isn't going to work." And that was the day that's when I really got interested in, okay, leverages and bone structures and all that matters, man. Like it's not as black and white. It's kind of like we mentioned earlier when we were texting about like, the PhDs and doctoral programs often just indoctrinate people with these one answers for everything.
Yep.
And that's one thing that has been my place in even in the faith is like, if we want to talk about baptism, man, make sure people understand all the beliefs and doctrines about baptism throughout church history. Don't just say it's this because that's what my pastor said it was. And so I think the same thing applies when you start moving into the fitness realm, which is why when you're going to work with people, it's one of the reasons I never wanted to go back to like commercial gym personal training because,
Yeah.
it's like they want you to be robotic in everything. And I just hate it. I can't do that. So
Well,
I
and they
like
want you
the
to
idea.
sell too. That's the problem with like commercial gyms. Like they want you to sell your own services.
Yeah. Yeah.
And a lot of good personal trainers aren't good salespeople. Like they're really
No,
good at training people.
I
Like
was a
hire some people that
horrible
are good
salesman.
at selling.
Yeah. Yeah. I was a terrible salesman, but I was a really good personal trainer.
Yeah.
Um, yeah, man. And I remember I'd have clients do stuff that, because I had a lot of women that I worked with and many of them had desk jobs and they're getting older and I'm going, well, it's highly possible your hamstrings are incredibly weak. So we need to get your hamstrings stronger so that as you get older, you're not stepping off a curb and you hyperextend and snap your ACL. Like dumb
Yeah.
stuff like that happens. And so I'd have them, I would do like these hyper modified Nordic curls. Like they're using a ball and walking themselves out and doing a slow eccentric. Like it's nothing. But man, my managers, dude, I got reprimanded and wrote up for stuff like that. And I'm like,
Really?
yeah, yeah, because they're like, no, we have the machines out there, train them on the machines. And I'm like, and I'm not even an anti-machine guy because like if I think about, if I'm training my bench press and I just hit a bunch of heavy barbell work, then some heavy dumbbell work, it's probably safer if I want to keep getting some pec work to get on a machine so I don't, get injured, have some kind of instability. Um, I think machines have their place, but I'm like, I don't think someone's entire training fitness regimen, like you're not teaching them how to walk, like,
Yeah.
so yeah, I got in a lot of trouble back then.
That's
A
so
lot of
wild. I
trouble.
mean, that's Like with the CSCS, it's if you're gonna squat, you squat to parallel, then you come up.
I did not
Why?
know that.
Yeah.
Really?
Every personal training certification, everyone's 90 degrees and then up. Parallel. Legs, femur parallel to the ground.
Interesting.
And it's like, why? Like, why
Yeah.
is that a thing? Like, so that's what everyone does. Whenever I go into high schools, my wife was a teacher at a high school. I'd go in there and watch the football coaches, the quote unquote strength and conditioning coaches, not
Hmm.
with the CSCS, just football coaches.
Yeah.
They're doing stuff in there. I'm like, I can't even look over there.
Oh,
It's just bad. Like
dude.
kids, it's bad.
And I don't even
Um,
like, I don't even have near your level of education, but I go to a high school and I hear what they're doing and see what they're doing. And I'm like, what is wrong with you people? Like, you wonder why your students aren't getting bigger, stronger, faster. Like, you
yeah,
literally are just using genetic potential and doing nothing to enhance it whatsoever, And
yeah.
like, it makes me, and then like, I was talking to a student one time, I was asking about deadlifting, and they were like, oh, we don't train deadlift. I was like, why? He said, well, it's just way too dangerous. I was like,
That's my favorite.
right. I'm like, since when, bro? Like, if you don't know how to deadlift, of course, but like, you have to pick stuff up off the ground every day. You better have the mechanical ability to be able to do that. But yeah, and I actually offered, at one point, I had a mom in the student ministry that her son was in the athletics department. And she said, hey, if the booster club was able to get you to come in and do like lifting seminars, like training the deadlift from ground up, how much would you charge? I said, I will do it for free, legitimately for free. If the coaches will let me, they would not let me. I've taken multiple of their athletes to state and powerlifting. Every single time I do, the coaches will not even acknowledge my existence. They hate me. But I'm like, I'm not even trying to challenge you. I want to help you, like,
Yeah.
but they won't. They just won't do it.
Well, there's a weird thing that goes on with coaches. There's some coaches that are in a sport that they know nothing about, so they're learning it
Hmm.
on the job. Which,
Yeah.
like, I get it. Like, there's just not a lot of teachers. Then there's other people that are coaching a sport that they're 100% in, like cross country, for example. They're doing a cross country. They have a cross country program, and they think strength is bad for the athlete. It's like, no.
I hear that all the
And
time.
then there's the other aspect of so many club coaches are around that you have these runners or athletes doing their thing with the high school, and then you have the club coach also doing stuff. So now the kids like getting bombarded with all this overdrive of overstimulating training.
Hmm.
The kids get burned out, and it's like anytime I work with an athlete, like a local athlete, like I have to talk to your coach. I need to know what your programming looks like.
Yeah.
I need them to know that if you come to me and like I'll do like grip assessments to see what their central nervous system looks like. So just take like a grip measuring thing because it's the most
Hmm.
simple thing to do. Squeeze it. One girl came over and her number was 54 pounds. The next time she came, it was 38. Like, we're not going as hard today then because your
Yeah.
number's lower. Your
Yeah.
nervous system's fatigued for school, test, whatever, running too much. I think she had great potential. She runs the 2 and 3 mile.
Hmm.
Uh, yeah, 2 and 3 mile. I was like, I think she has, sorry, the 1 and 2 mile. I think she has great advantage for her sport, but I think she got burned out too quick. And now she's like overtraining. And they're
Yeah.
already back into, they took 1 week off of training and now they're back into training. I'm like, and I keep trying to reach out to the coach. I'm like, I want to talk to this coach because one, I don't know if he knows programming well enough.
Hmm.
Two, I want to correct any issue she has. So if she comes to me and she's burned out, we're doing yoga. We're doing
Yeah.
some breathing exercises. We're trying, like, I want to refacilitate proper recovery so you
Yeah.
can become a better athlete. If you come
Absolutely.
to me and you're doing some like higher volume, low intensity stuff or low density and intensity stuff, then yeah, let's throw on some weight. Like, let's get some movements happening. Let's tax the system a little bit more.
Hmm.
But if you're working with your coach and you're taxing your system 5 days a week, like, don't come to me and expect anything other than getting the best bang for your buck. And that could just, yeah, like I said, we might be laying on the ground for an hour doing breath work, learning how to control things,
Yeah.
doing some, corrective exercise movements just to get you to function better, not worse.
Yeah.
Whereas other coaches, unfortunately, a running coach at a high school, a running coach as a club coach, they're just doing more running stuff because that's what they're
Yeah.
getting paid for. And it's like
Yeah.
the more I do, the better it'll be. Like not
No,
always.
no, definitely not always.
Like
Yeah.
some kids can handle it. Like whenever you're younger, it's Olympians to, or I guess junior high kids to Olympians. The
Mhm.
difference between the people are you have genetics, and what dictates genetics of that person making it to the Olympics or to a high level professional league is, let's take a baseball player, a thrower, a pitcher. Junior high, really good. High school, really good. Maybe a couple injuries, not too bad, not like stressing anything, but like they might have to sit out a game. Cool. Get to college. More injuries start happening. Now they're out of the game. The people that make it further can compensate more in those injuries because their genetic propensity for injury is just a bigger range.
Yeah.
So they can compensate more and make it further. That's the only difference. Mechanics of most of these people are garbage.
Yeah.
Like I see
Yeah.
people moving, I'm like, I feel weird sometimes because I'm like watching, like I'll watch a girl walk and it looks like I'm looking at her butt and I'm like, I'm just looking at how her pelvis
Yep.
is moving and
Yeah.
how she's getting no extension whenever she's walking.
Yeah.
And like, oh, like her knees like buckling in, her right knee's buckling in every time. And it's like, oh, do you have this issue and this issue? And did you have a kid and you hold them on your right side? Like, how'd you know that? It's like, oh, I'm psychic. No, really, I
Right.
just know
Right.
the body.
Yeah. Man, it's so true, dude. That's wild. Yeah.
So it's unfortunate, but I
Yeah.
wish schools and coaches would be. I just wish that's my biggest thing for everything I do. I want full truth. If I'm wrong, tell me I'm wrong so I can figure it out. And even if I'm right, maybe I'll learn something. Maybe there's miscommunication or I said it in a weird way.
Yeah.
I want to learn the truth and I want to give the truth.
Yeah.
I also
Yeah.
want people to be open-minded. That's like my two biggest things: full truth and be open-minded to everything.
Yeah.
Like I can talk about something one way, you can talk about it a slightly different way, and we could be saying the same thing. Someone's going to hear you and say, yeah, what Daniel's saying makes more sense than what Anthony's saying. It's like, well, we're saying the same thing, but whatever.
Right.
Like as long as it's truthful,
Yeah.
keep doing it. Like everyone has room in this world to help people out.
Yeah. Absolutely. Absolutely. Man, 100% on board with that. Yeah. Well, dude, I think so. Chelsea and I like to do semi-local little vacations, and so
Well, let's wrap this up real quick and then we'll get to that.
yeah, sounds good. Yeah.
Do you want to let people know where they can find you? Or on your social medias? Do you want people to
Yeah.
follow you or
Yeah,
not?
sure. So my lifting page that I post most of my stuff on is it's dr.famen, which is THAMON. No, that's my actual account. It's dr. What is it? Let me look. I forget. I have 3 accounts, and one of them is a personal, which is just like we went and rode our motorcycle today and we ate a steak. And then I have an account that I just started where I do a lot of my teaching. But yeah, so it's dr_lifts_official. So Dr. Lifts official. There's some food on there, but it's mostly lifting. So
Because you're a
anyone who
doctor.
wants to track the progress, yeah. And I put thoughts on there. Like one of the things I told my friend is like, I want to start the page not to just be like, hey, everyone, look how good my lifts are, but like, I want people to see what's working and what's not and share the experience, So that's what I love about this podcast. But yes, what you did say, I'm also not a doctor. It's play on my initials. My full name is Daniel Thaman Roland. So I just did DR, put it in the front. But yeah, so.
Well, cool.
Yeah.
Well, thanks for coming on. That was a
man.
great podcast.
Yeah.
Great stories. I love it.
Yeah,
So
definitely.
cool.
Definitely.
We'll talk to everyone next time. See y'all later.
Yeah. See ya.